is RetroFuture, and I have another Battleborn character review episode for you. And in this video, we are going to be looking at Kelvin. We are going to be looking at the Icy Defender from the Eldrid faction. We're going to be looking at his skill setup, his Helix loadout, his lore and backstory, and tips and tricks that I have found to try and use this guy as effectively as possible on the battlefield. So let's get right into his skill setup. His first skill is called Subliminate. Subliminate is pretty much Kelvin transforms into a cloud of mist, and for roughly 3 seconds he can travel at much greater speed, and when you touch enemies you deal a small amount of damage to them and you stun them for a very short time, roughly 1 second. Sublimate was pretty good. It used to be much better. It used to stun them for a lot longer, but they nerfed it a while back to make it a little more fair and balanced, because it used to stun you, I think, for like probably close to 3 seconds, and that was just, it was just free, you know, you were a free target for that. So Sublimate was toned down a little bit. Now his second skill is called Chomp. You tap the button once to prepare it, and then you tap it again to activate it, and Kelvin will chomp at the enemy right in front of him. It'll deal a small amount of damage, and then 15% of their maximum health, with a maximum up to 500 damage. If the target is killed by Chomp, Kelvin will gain permanent health. Now here's the kicker about Chomp that I really like. It instantly kills minor enemies. So Chomp has a damage cap of up to 500. However, if the target is killed, Kelvin gains permanent health, and it will always instantly kill minor enemies. So those small little minions, like in Meltdown and Incursion, that are marching towards the enemy side, Chomp will kill any one of them regardless. It'll kill any small minion. It'll have trouble killing the larger minions, but you can still kill them if they're weak enough. So it's very important to use Chomp. We'll get into that later, but Chomp I really like. And his ultimate is called Ice Wall. After a 1 second delay, Kelvin creates an impassable ice wall that lasts for 7 seconds, and it will stun nearby enemies upon spawn, and it will also restrict and block movement. One of the ultimates I'm not too efficient with, so I'm not too fond of it, but it still has its uses. His passive ability is called Permafrost. Every time Kelvin completes any skill, he temporarily gains shield strength. This is pretty much increasing his survivability, and as we all know, Eldrid don't have a natural shield regen on their own, so the fact that Kelvin can generate his own shield every time he finishes using one of his skills, this means that whenever he uses a skill, he'll gain a little bit of a shield, and he can keep stacking skills and try and keep shield strength so that he can prevent himself from taking damage. So his Permafrost is not too bad of a passive ability. His basic melee attack is R2, he'll just, you know, punch and slash in front of him, and his L2 secondary attack, he will pound the ground and deal area of effect damage around him with a roughly small knockback effect. And that's really all there is for Kelvin's starting skill setup. You know, Sublimate, Chomp, Ice Wall, Permafrost, and his primary and secondary melee attacks. Now we're going to move on to his lore and backstory. So the first thing about Kelvin you should know is he's not actually a single entity being like a regular person. He's actually a culmination of these microscopic organisms that Miko refers to as Kelvites. And they're a bunch of microscopic organisms that work together in kind of like a hive mentality, but also have the capacity that once they take physical form, they can speak and think as if they were a single individual. Similar to what Miko is, and that's why Miko and Kelvin have such a strong relatable bond to one another. However, Kelvin was unable to take a physical form. He needed some type of host, something solid to latch onto to give him the ability to take form. And that's where Phoebe comes in. Phoebe was working with Miko, and they tried to figure out what type of form, what type of host based structure that Kelvin should create his host body out of, what it should be based off of. And after a couple games of poker, turns out Miko is a beast at poker, they decided to go to the Aztanti ruins on Bliss and look for Aztanti relics and try and use those to give Kelvin a base model for his to take form as. And he chose one of the Aztanti Guardian relics, and it's somewhat based around the look of an Aztanti dragon, by the looks of it. So Kelvin was able to take the physical form of an Aztanti dragon relic, something along those lines, from Bliss, thanks to Miko and Phoebe's help, and Kelvin was finally able to take physical form. However, he lacked the ability to communicate in the language that everyone spoke as normally. And that's where Cleese came in. Cleese actually modified this little transmitter attached to Kelvin, and he had trouble, adjusting it so that it perfectly translated Kelvin's thoughts and into understandable words. So it was a little frustrating for Cleese and Kelvin to try and put up with one another before they could finally get the device to work, and so that Kelvin could finally speak. But once Cleese made the proper adjustments and Kelvin was able to speak in the language that everyone understood, Kelvin was appreciative. He said, "I am in your debt." And from that point on, Kelvin's been a member of the Battleborn. He's been fighting on the front lines, and Galt notes that he's actually very protective. He takes the role, in the game, Kelvin is given the title of Defender, and it really could not be more true based on his protective personality. At one point, a little furry critter, when on Bliss, when Kelvin and Galt were together with a bunch of other Battleborn, a little furry critter jumped out of nowhere and startled Kelvin, and Kelvin created ice walls all around the party and sealed everyone off to protect them, and Galt was like, "Dude, really? Like, I understand you're protective of us and all, but come on, it's a little fuzzball. It's not going to attack us. It's just a wild animal." So Kelvin is a little overprotective, but that's just his nature. He's a compassionate, caring person, but he's also got a bit of a mean streak like all Eldrid. He's not afraid to put up a fight and throw down with the best of them. And that's it for Kelvin's lore and backstory. Now we're going to move on to his Helix loadout, and I'm going to show you the loadouts that I like to use when playing as Kelvin. Alright, so right off the bat at level 1, I like to go with density. I like to increase Kelvin's maximum health, an extra 360 health right off the bat. Just makes Kelvin harder to kill. He already has a fair amount of health anyway. We're just going to make it so that he's actually kind of tough to kill. Level 1, this gives him increased survivability in combat. The Big Chill is a good alternative. It helps him stay alive longer as well. So if you don't have density, you can go with the Big Chill. I never really did like Cold Lock, just because if you miss with that 4th melee hit, it's a wasted perk. It only works for something. It only works during the melee hits if that 4th one hits. But the Big Chill and density you always have access to because they're continuous. So I prefer the density, and if you don't have density, go with the Big Chill for level 1. Next up, level 2. I like to go with Diffusion. Chomp deals bonus damage equal to 3% of Kelvin's current health. That means the greater Kelvin's current health is, the more damage it does, up to a certain amount, obviously. That's one of Chomp's limitations. If you don't have Diffusion, you can go with Quick Bite. Damaging an enemy with Chomp will increase Kelvin's movement speed. This will make it so that he can do a Chomp, kill a minion, and then get out of trouble if he needs to, or reposition himself, or continue dancing around his opponent as he melees them. Strong Wind isn't a terrible option, but I like Quick Bite personally for level 2 if I don't have access to Diffusion. Next up, level 3, I like to go with Swelling Wind. The longer Kelvin remains in his Subliminate form, the more his movement speed increases. I prefer Swelling Wind over Ice Maker because the stun is what makes Subliminate, I think, so good. I don't like to use the slow, nor I'm not opposed to slow. Slow is a great affliction, a status ailment to inflict our enemies, but I don't like downgrading stun to slow. I just don't. That's just me personally. You're free to use it, but I like Swelling Wind for 3. Next up, level 4, I like to go with Mastication Restoration. A portion of health damage dealt by Chomp is returned to Kelvin as health. So 23% lifesteal. We want to increase Kelvin's max health so that he does as much extra bonus damage with Chomp, which means we get more lifesteal. So the greater Chomp is, the more effective it is at damaging opponents, the more life we can get out of using it. Mastication Restoration I like a lot. Shield Snacker isn't terrible either, and neither is Slow Food. However, Slow Food you only gain access to Slow Food if you chomp someone when they're slowed. So there's limits on that. So Mastication Restoration works whenever you get a chomp in, same with Shield Snacker. But I like Mastication Restoration personally. Next up, level 5. Either one of these is perfectly fine. You can go with Ice 6 or Blue Ice. Either one is up to you. I don't really have a personal preference on either one. I'm not that great with Kelvin personally, so I don't have a preference right here for level 5. Now, next up, level 6, I like to go with Wind Chill. Well, Sublimate... Oh, actually, sorry. Consume. I like killing an enemy with Chomp drastically decreases Subliminate's cooldown. Wind Chill is not a terrible idea. However, Consume can be used in combination. So you use Subliminate, and then you stun a bunch of enemies, and then you quickly use Chomp on a minion, and you get the kill off Chomp, and then you get the 5-second cooldown reduction on Sublimate, meaning you can use it faster, and you get the health increase from killing an enemy with Chomp. So there's no reason not to use Consume, really. Wind Chill isn't terrible, but I prefer Consume, because it flows better with Kelvin's arsenal. Next up, level 7. I never really did like Iceheart all that much, but I prefer Icy Force or Groupthink. Either one of them is up to you. Iceheart is more of a toned-down version of the Whiskey Foxtrot perk that grants him health regen whenever he gets a kill. However, Kelvin's Iceheart only works when he kills enemy Battleborn or takes part in killing the enemy Battleborn. If it's just a regular minion, it does nothing for him. So it's a little bit of a toned-down version of the same perk that Whiskey Foxtrot has whenever he gets a kill. So I prefer Groupthink or Icy Force, either one of them is fine. Next up, level 8, I like to go with Windy Season, decreasing Subliminate's cooldown, allowing for more frequent use. Hibernation isn't terrible, but I do like Windy Season just because it allows me to use Sublimate more often, meaning I can stun my opponents, or I can beat that hasty retreat if necessary. Next up, level 9, I like to go with Sawtooth, increasing Chomp's maximum health bonus damage. More damage with Chomp means we have a greater chance of killing enemies that don't die to Chomp's initial hit, like, you know, larger minion bots as well as enemy Battleborn. And not only the increase in damage, but since Chomp is now doing more damage, we also inflict more we also get more lifesteal off of Sawtooth as well. So we're leeching off of our opponents and regenerating Kelvin's health in addition to dealing more damage. And lastly, level 10. I don't really have a preference because I'm not a huge fan of Ice Wall personally. I'm not a huge fan of it. If you want, you can go with Walled In and reduce the Ice Wall's cooldown so you can use it more often. Absolute Zero is also a decent alternative. Enemies caught in close range of Ice Wall are slowed down. So either one is fine. Great Wall is kind of meh in my opinion, but I like Walled In and Absolute Zero for level 10. And that's going to do it for my Helix loadout for Kelvin. Now we're going to head back to the gameplay. Alright, now when it comes to gear and equipment, I like to give Kelvin stuff to increase his health regen. He has so much health, his natural health regen can be a little lacking in my opinion. So certain items that increase his health regen from 7.0 per second to like 14, as well as, you know, other pieces of body armor. I have you know, items that increase his health regen by, you know, 7 points, and also there's other items that increase his armor, his damage resistance, and also his health regen. So I really like to focus on his health regen a lot, just to make it so that Kelvin can just stay alive, regen his health. He has so much health, so I like to give him as much health regen as possible, and I also like to give him movement speed. I've had a little trouble keeping up with people on the run when I'm trying to melee them, when I'm trying to ground pound them, or just use my standard R2 melee. Sometimes enemies can kind of move away from me, and I like to close the gap and get him closer since he is a melee character. So Kelvin's, I try to focus on a little bit on his movement speed. Not so much his sprint speed, but his movement speed. If I need to run away, I can use his sublimate attack to try and beat hasty retreat. So his sprint speed is fine in my opinion, but I like to focus on his movement speed, his health regen, and then either giving him an increase in health or an increase in damage resistance. Now when it comes to using Kelvin in the battlefield, I like to pass up on fighting enemy Battleborn unless there's a numbers advantage, unless we're able to gang up on people, as you see right here. But for the most part, I like to focus on using Kelvin's Chomp ability to take out small little minions, to take them out. It'll increase his max health every time he kills an enemy with Chomp, so focus on those little minions. It's an instant kill with Chomp anyway, regardless. Get that kill, increase your max health, give Kelvin more XP, level him up so that he gets a little stronger and tougher and is then able to engage in fights and actually be more dangerous. I found that Kelvin is actually not as effective as I would like him to be in one-on-one battles, but then again, that could be me. He's kind of difficult to master. He's not an easy beginner character. He's fun, but he's not the easiest to master, in my opinion. Now, one thing I do like about Kelvin is that he actually can combo, he can form some fun, unique combos. I was actually playing with a friend not too long ago, about a week and a half ago. I was Kelvin, he was Boulder, and actually, no, it was the other way around. I was Boulder, he was Kelvin. And what happened was he activated Sublimate and stunned an enemy. I ran up to him, started meleeing him, and as soon as he was about to regain consciousness, I used my Boulder Dash shoulder charge, knocked him into a wall, and stunned him. And then Kelvin had already come out, and then we just ganged up on him, pinned that enemy in a corner, and finished him off. Now, not only do you have that option, but don't forget, Kelvin has his ice wall. So once the enemy is pinned against the wall, thanks to Boulder not shoulder charging his opponent into the wall, you can use the ice wall, and with the opponent on the wall, against the wall, the ice wall will have very little chance of getting in you or your teammate's way since you're aligning it parallel to the wall of the map anyway. And that's one of the biggest problems I found with the ice wall. You can actually screw yourself and screw your team over if you put it down carelessly. So ice wall, I'm not that good at it. It's not a terrible skill, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's a terrible, bad skill, but if you use it carelessly, you can do more harm than good. You can actually block yourself from moving, from getting away, or you could prevent your teammates from securing a kill that they wanted to get. So ice wall requires good precision, and it requires a little bit of a setup, and Boulder, you know, an already stunned enemy is a good setup, especially if they're stunned in an area like against a wall, way you throw up the ice wall and it's parallel to the wall of the map. That's a great setup, and that's something you should always look to combo. Look for certain characters on the ally team that you can combo ice wall with to take full advantage of it and minimize the chances of negative repercussions. So in summation, I think that Kelvin is a fun melee character. He's not traditional, he's not what you would expect. A lot of his skills are rather different from what you would expect in terms of, you know, other characters like Wrath or Phoebe or whatever. He's got a different set of, almost like a different mindset you have to play with him. You have to play as kind of like an opportunistic melee character. You can't really just charge the front lines and expect to use all your skills and win. He's got a big frame, he's a big target. Montanas they love Kelvins. Yes, you can use Sublimate and target them, but whenever I play as Montana and I see a Kelvin, he'll sublimate me, then he'll try and attack me, and then I just turn up the heat on him and I just melt him. So Montanas are one of the biggest weaknesses for Kelvin. But other than that, Kelvin's a fun character. I think he's enjoyable. He's just not the best melee character. And that's really all I've got for this review. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to like, favorite, subscribe, and stay tuned for more. This is RadTech Shoes signing off.